It's the Fellowship of the Geek Show, a weekly podcast about comics, the comic book industry, and other geek pop culture. Music courtesy of Manny the Martyr. And now, on with the show!
Hey there, everybody. It's the Fellowship of the Geeks podcast. My name is Thomas Chick, and joining me for this episode is Mike Marlowe.
Hey, gang.
Les Webster.
Hello, all.
And Liz Newman.
Hello, everybody.
How are you guys doing?
Well, Liz almost contained the laughter there for a second. That was
Yeah.
pretty cool. Groovy. Can't answer the
Peachy.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
This ought to be good.
Mm-hmm. I hope everybody out there is doing okay. So, what's been going on in your corner of the galaxy?
Well, I actually watched two new Hulu series. I didn't know that they were doing, I guess it was like a 5-night premiere for a show called Candy, and it's Jessica Biel. Apparently she's produced quite a few different movies. I didn't know that. But she was actually the star in this one, and it was based on a true story. Kind of weird. Spoilers. I will say this is spoilers for it. The best part of this is because I think I even posted on Discord. I don't know anything about Jessica Biel. I watched her on Seventh Heaven. Yeah, she was pretty cool there, but I remember there was some kind of problem with her. I don't even remember what the problem was, and they kind of wrote her out of the show. That's all I knew about, Jessica Biel. That, and she's married to Justin Timberlake, right? Well, I'm sitting here. There's 2 cops that come in because she kills somebody. That's known from the very beginning. That's not the spoiler. What's the spoiler is the 2 guys that come in to investigate this. One of them is Jason Ritter, who is married to Melanie Malinsky, who is actually the girl who's murdered in this show. And the other cop was Justin Timberlake. And I kept looking at him, and I'm like, why the hell does this guy look so familiar? I couldn't place him, so I had to, I pulled up Google while I'm watching this, and I had to know, who are these guys? Because Jason Ritter looked awfully familiar, too. Well, Jason Ritter, of course, looks like his dad, but I've seen him play in a lot of other stuff, too. So I knew that was, that was his dad. But when I see Justin Timberlake, now it's like, I should post a picture of what he looks like. When they were making this movie, he was reading it along because, of course, this is his wife's project and everything else. Well, they got to the point where they ran out of money. And so he's reading this scene in particular, and he was like, well, who's going to play this? And she's like, well, we don't know yet because, we don't really have anybody to play it. And he's like, well, I'll do it. She's like, no, you're kidding. And he's like, no, for real. The only thing is to make sure you get my hair right. And he wanted this prosthetic belly to wear with this haircut and this prosthetic belly. It was perfect. I mean, I guess maybe if he was a big Timberlake fan, you would have been like, oh, that's him. But for someone like me, I've just, I've seen him here and there, of course, because, he's made headlines quite a few times. But I didn't really, like I said, that was kind of like, wow. But it was kind of cool, too, that these guys who basically was walking through the murder, one guy's wife was the murderer and the other guy's wife was the victim. So it was kind of like, that's pretty cool, He called her on her shit, But it's pretty good. I'm wanting to say that Candy takes place in like 78, 79, And it is a true story. It happened out here in Wiley, Texas, which was another thing that was kind of like, well, maybe I should watch this. But after I got done watching this one, one of those, because you watch this, you may like this, popped up. And it was one called Under the Banner of Heaven, which has got Spider-Man guy, Andrew
Garfield?
Yes. He's like the main guy in this show. But it's weird. It is really, really freaking weird. Now, I'm going to put this disclaimer right here before I say anything else about this movie. I find all religions very interesting. Hell, I grew up Christian myself, but growing up Christian, it's always made me wonder. And so I've read a lot about other religions and other practices and what makes us different and blah, 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 blah. And I had some relatives who became Mormons, and I didn't know what Mormons were, you know. And the more I looked into it, you know, it was kind of weird, but, you know, hey, people would look at my religion and say the same damn thing. So to each their own. This movie is based on the LDS, the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. And it kind of goes into some weird shit. And of course, like I said, once again, being interested in religion, I definitely wanted to check this out because some of these things I have never heard. Because while you're watching this crime story play out in real time, it kind of goes back into the time of Joseph Smith's time, when he was founding the Mormon religion and some of the wars and the massacres and things that took place for the Mormons to become the established religion they are today. So, of course, I wanted to know if some of this was true. Under the Banner of Heaven is exaggerated, of course. It's very, very, very exaggerated. But if you put all of that out of your mind and just watch the story, it's freaking weird. I mean, it was kind of one of those at one point. It was like, I don't know if I want to continue to watch this because it put me out of a comfort zone that I was not comfortable being out of, you know. But it makes you think. And at the, you know, and all through this, I have to say, Andrew Garfield was amazing in this. I think I've only seen him in Spider-Man before, so it was kind of weird seeing him in this role. But it's kind of a man who's questioning his faith, which, of course, to Mormons, their faith, well, and Christians too, it's your life. It's your lifestyle. There's things you can do and things you can't do because of your faith. So when he's in this, living this, has a wife of the same faith and kids, about to get baptized in the faith, and all of a sudden he's questioning his faith, that in itself made for a very interesting story. Just the breakdown of who am I if I'm not this, you know. But the murder that was going on was even more interesting, of course. So if you have a while, it is a short mini-series. It has some amazing actors in it. One of the guys who caught my attention, there was this bug. Shh. There was a series on...
There was a bug?
TV.
What?
Yep, there's a bug. There was a series on TV. I think it was a 3-part event for Waco and what happened there. And we met one of the guys at Waco, and it was interesting because the guy who played him in that movie was in this movie too. And it was like, wait a minute, you know, is he just playing like crazy religious guys?
That's a hell of a typecast, isn't it?
Right. But he's
This is
another
calling.
one.
Oh.
I kept looking
Wow.
at that was like, why does he look so familiar? Well, he's Rory Culkin. He's, you know, his first name just left my head.
Macaulay Culkin's little brother?
Yes, Macaulay Culkin's little brother. And it's like, wow, I did not know that. And then, of course, after I Googled it and saw who he was, looking at him, it's like, I should have known that, you know. Just last name alone should have told me that, but the face and everything else. But looking at his IMBD, he's good at playing a crazy part, you know. In this one, wow. I mean, he's pretty out there. So yeah, it's like I said, it's pretty interesting if you like Andrew Garfield, and like I said, it's very heavy, not religious as come to the altar after you watch this kind of thing. It is based around, I hate to say based around the Mormon faith, but the people in the movie are Mormons, and it's kind of someone who has taken their faith and is taking it so far out of the box that it's no longer their faith. So I wouldn't see this show or movie or whatever, because like I said, there's 8 episodes. I wouldn't see it as a knock on the Mormon faith, because every faith has that crazy that takes the word and twists it and makes it what they want it to. I mean, I just mentioned Waco. That's exactly what happened there with David Koresh. He took the teachings of the Latter-day Saints and twisted it into what he wanted it. And that's kind of what these guys were doing too. They wanted so bad for it to be this way that they made it this way. So I wouldn't see this as a knock to the Mormons. This is a knock to crazy ass people. You know? So, but it's really good. Once you get it, it does have some slow parts, because there's a guy who's arrested at the very beginning. His wife was the one murdered, and you kind of, there's a lot of like teachings from him, and you know, like a lot of speaking from him. So once you get past all of that and you get into the story and kind of understand who's who in this story, it's pretty good. I don't think it's been out very long either, but Hulu did this the same way they did Candy, and did it like a night by night release. So it was a special release that they did. But yeah, like I said, both pretty good. I watched them both in the weekend, so
what was the Mormon one called again?
The Mormon one is called Under the Banner of Heaven.
Oh, right, okay.
And I think that one was suggested to me because, for one, Candy does have some religious overtones in it, but not like this did. But I had just finished that Spider-Man marathon, a couple of weeks ago. So I think it was like, hey.
So Amazon still had Andrew Garfield on the brain.
Yeah, you might like this. But it was really good. Like I said, it's one that you definitely, it makes you think. There's a lot of history in it, which I was more interested in the historical stuff that was happening than the actual story that was going on. But the actual story going on was pretty interesting too. It's just the historical stuff was like, wow, you know, shit really happens, you know. And all the rabbit hole jumping and everything else to find out about this movie, it did lead me to the Mormon website where they have addressed this movie, and they pretty much said the same thing. Some of this stuff is accurate, but some of it was grossly exaggerated for sake of entertainment. So take it with a grain of salt, you know.
Hey, honestly, give them credit if that's what they're saying, rather than, oh no, it's terrible, ban it. That's no credit to them for that.
Yeah.
I didn't see anywhere where they called for it to be banned. And I think it was kind of, you know, respectful too, because some of it they were kind of like, yeah, that happened. You know, there was something on I think it was the Mountain Creek Massacre, where they came upon some settlers and they pretty much massacred them, and they disguised themselves as Indians to make them think that the Indians had done it instead of the Mormons. And they pretty much addressed that, and they were like, well, that's not, you know, we weren't dressed as Indians, but yes, these people were killed. And, you know, so they acknowledged that they had a bloody past, that it's not perfect, you know. And I think anytime you have any religion trying to get to the masses or find their feet, it gets bloody. I mean, how long have we had the religious crusades? It's still going on over there. So it's, it was very interesting. I hope they go back and look more at the historical. I would be interested in that. But they wrapped this one up pretty good without being all like, this is the way, which I enjoyed that. But some of the things that were happening in the Mormon faith, if you're a Mormon and your wife's a Mormon and you decide that you no longer want to be Mormon, then your wife can no longer talk to you. She can't see you. If you have kids who have decided not to be, they don't talk to their kids. It's very, you're either with us or you're gone, So that was played in this movie too. They didn't want them just gone. They wanted her dead. So it was pretty good. And I believe this is a book that it came from, and it's based on a true murder, but it's not what happened, or that doesn't make sense. But
it's not the actual case,
right? It's the same murder, but it's what they did in the background wasn't who I believe. I don't know if they ever found who her murderer was. And so this is kind of their assumption of this could have happened, I believe. I'm not sure on that. But the author of this book is a true crime writer, so but yeah, it's pretty good. Like I said, Andrew did a very, very good job in this.
Cool.
All righty. Follow it up, Mikey.
Okay. I'm not. My thing is not religious at all. Well, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. You could probably form a religion based on this, but that would be interesting.
Am I going to say, "Oh God" or something?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, that depends on. I don't know. No, I don't think so. But yeah, I watched a documentary, and here's the part where you might say, "Oh God." I believe Liz has talked about this one before.
Oh God.
And it is called "The Show Must Go On: The Queen and Adam Lambert Story."
Ah, yes.
It's from 2019 and it's on Netflix. And it was a really nicely done little documentary. It's a little bit of an emotional ride. Maybe even more so if you're a really big Queen fan. But it's, obviously the story starts with Freddie. I mean, the whole thing is all about Freddie. Because honestly, Freddie was, to say that Freddie was Queen would be maybe just a slight overstatement, because the other guys were there too, and they were a major part of the whole thing. But, nobody really expected Queen to carry on after Freddie died. And it took quite some time before, there were a couple of, they were hesitant to call them attempts at resurrecting Queen. They weren't really trying when things happened, because there was a couple of, they got together and came up with the musical back in the early 2000s, I think it was. I don't remember exactly. And they fiddled around and they played with other stuff, and they had guests come in and they did stuff with guests, and they got invited to do things. And then the Paul Rogers thing sort of happened. And that just they were just sort of cruising along, not really, living their own lives and doing this other stuff at the same time, because, John Deacon just sort of quit. He walked away and went and had a normal life after all of that. Roger Taylor was a producer for quite a while afterwards. Brian May went and got his PhD in astrophysics, which is no small feat. but they kind of kept coming back to the Queen thing every so often, and then Adam Lambert happens on American Idol,
Oh.
and they near the end, I think it was the final episode.
Yep. It was the finals.
Brian and Roger got invited to come on the show so that the two finalists could perform, and they did. I think it was "We Are the Champions,"
Mm-hmm.
and it was Brian seemed a little awkward about it when he was talking about it, because he's like, the other guy was really good, but it really just clicked with Adam.
Yeah.
And Adam was just he and Roger both, and Brian May and Roger Taylor are very different people and have very different motivations and very different ways of looking at things, and they were both like, this guy is special, straight up. And as much as because it's fun, because they would go in the documentary, they would go back and forth between Brian and Roger, and just the way they would talk about things, they would be talking about the same thing, and it was so different. It was hilarious. It was kind of an interesting look at their actual personalities, or at least the ones they were putting up for the documentary. However, they didn't seem to me to be actors, but
Yeah.
anything's possible. But so yeah, and Adam Lambert's just kind of an interesting character anyway.
He is.
Way more so than I ever would have thought before I saw this. So it's a really interesting story, and the documentary tells it really well too. So it is most assuredly worth checking out. Whether you love Queen or not, it is still interesting, even if you're not a huge Queen fan. I think. I mean, I kind of am, but
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting enough story by itself that it doesn't really matter. Nothing really matters. But anyway.
Wow.
Any way the wind blows.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be a really big American Idol fan. I've always been into singing and stuff, and of course that was when he came along, he was so different than anything they had ever auditioned before, and there was just something really special about him. Queen coming on, which I never in a million years would have thought Queen would have ever done American Idol, But when they came on and they came together, it was like, holy shit,
Well,
this works.
The clicking point for them coming on the show was in the televised version of Adam's audition at the beginning of the season.
Mm-hmm.
He sang Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yep.
That's where it all started. And that's why they ended up, and they decided the whole "We Are the Champions" thing. So they're like, let's just try. We'll just try to call them and see if they'll do it. And they did.
Yep. And I think another reason why he clicked for them is he never came in trying to replace anybody. It was kind of like he had his own solo career. I mean, they did him dirty on American Idol. And actually, at looking back now, it was like they did him a favor, because he went on and had his own little solo career there for a while and made money and was kind of like, haha, screw you guys. I'm not under contract because I didn't win. But,
right. I mean, coming in second was the best thing that could have possibly happened for him, for sure.
Yep. But then when he fell in with Queen after the show, it was like that. It makes sense. They did a lot of things together during lockdown for their fans, which I thought was very beautiful and moving. But it's weird. I like him because when he was on American Idol, he did all the music I liked, of course, but his solo career was never anything that I would listen to because it's a little too poppy
It's
for
a little
me.
too pop, yeah.
Yeah. But when he got together with Queen, it was like, yeah, this I could listen to.
Mm-hmm. And there are plenty of clips from their shows in the documentary, and yeah, I would be willing to go see a show of theirs.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, and I'm a recluse and don't like going to crowded concerts anymore, but I would do it for that.
and anyone I've ever heard that has met Adam has been like, he is the sweetest guy. He's so down to earth and humble. And it's like, it's weird because looking at him, I know you don't judge books by covers, but he looks like he would be a diva, this is my space kind of person, and he's not. So I thought that was pretty cool too. He appreciates where he's at, but he's worked to get there.
Yep. It's on Netflix.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Anything else?
Not from me, no.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, I didn't mean to take it over from you.
No,
Yeah, right.
I knew it was coming anyway. Whether anybody else did or not. Yeah.
Okay, Les.
Other than studying up for this week's topic, when I pulled the movie we're going to discuss up, one of the movies they also posted for me to watch was the 1963 great film PT-109, which I had not seen since probably 63. Which was such a fun movie to watch. I'm glad they make choices for me at times. This was Cliff Robertson. Norman Fell was with it. Robert Blake. Some others. But it was so much fun to relive that, because that was released just months before the assassination. So you could say it was timely, but that would almost be crude to say. It is a magnificent movie, and if you get the chance, be sure to watch it, because it's something that'll make you cock your head and go, wow, he actually did that stuff. So that's about it for me this week.
Interesting that whatever you were watching this made the jump between those two things.
It was on HBO Max.
Okay, so it's got a lot more history to pull from when it's pulling stuff for you then.
Yes.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
I do not see the connection. But yeah, that makes more sense.
Okay, well, for me, I really have a big bag of nothing this week. Actually been working on other things, so I haven't really had any time to kind of settle down and check anything out. So, but I'll have something for next week, I guess.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. All right, before we get into this week's discussion, I do want to point out that we do have a Discord that y'all can join us. Kind of when we're not recording, we're usually in there. Usually post a lot of news items, memes, jokes, discussion topics, videos, trailers, that kind of stuff. Discord is free to sign up, and the apps are available in any app store, and they're free as well. We do have an open invite on our homepage, www.thefellowshipofthegeeks.net. In addition to all the things I've already mentioned, we also usually have some kind of activity on Discord, like a movie night or just kind of hop on and chit-chat, that kind of stuff. We hadn't done one of those in a while, but we'll be doing one here real soon. So like I said, feel free to join us if you'd like. It's always fun to hang out with everybody.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
We like people. Despite all the stuff we say about how we don't like people.
Well, we like people, just not in person.
I love humanity. It's people I hate.
There you go.
A person can be smart. People, never mind.
Yeah.
People are dumb,
Yep.
panicky, and never mind.
You're going into that Tommy Lee Jones speech from Men in Black. That's right.
That's one of my favorite lines in any movie. Yeah.
Because it's accurate.
Mm.
All right. We were going to discuss this. I had originally had this plan earlier, like for last month, which would make sense. But May mark the 125th anniversary of the release of the classic novel Dracula by Bram Stoker. And I'm sure you've heard of the novel. I'm sure you've seen the movie, or the
Some of
500 different 500 different versions of either based on the book or the play that came from the book. But so for this week, to kind of celebrate this anniversary, because we did celebrate Mary Shelley's Frankenstein last year, if I'm remembering correctly.
So
We did it sometime around that, but yeah, we did it for like the 200th.
Yeah. So I think it was last year, but it may have been a year before. Anyway, so figured we also should kind of discuss this novel and obviously the impact it has had. So with that, who'd like to give their thoughts?
well, on the book, once you get into the speech of the book, it gets better. Once you wrap your head around that. I liked the book. I felt that at times it got a little wordy, though, and a little draggy. And it's been years since I've read this book because it was kind of one of those, if you're ever goth or if you're ever vampire, into vampires and that kind of thing, you have to read this book. It's stable. But when you get into like the diaries and the notes and that kind of stuff, that's where it kind of loses me. And I think after, was it 3 or 4 chapters, that's what it goes into. So the first half of the book is great. I did like it though, because the general story and everything else and everything we got from it, but like I said, it's one of those that does get wordy. It you have to get used to the speech of the book. I mean, 125 years. There's big difference there.
Right. It's most certainly born out of Victorian England. And the style of writing that was going on at the time.
As far as movies that have come along after it, it's the basic story, but sometimes you get Hollywood injecting themselves into it, and it changes that story.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
That doesn't happen.
I hadn't seen all of Francis Coppola. I can't say Coppola's. I had not seen all of his Bram Stoker's Dracula, I think, until Halloween with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize you hadn't seen it before that. Wow.
I had seen probably the first 20 minutes of the movie, and actually it was one that I walked out on. And I regret walking out on it, but at the time it was like, that's bullshit. And I think
which is funny, because when we watched it several months ago, I think that's about the point where we jumped in.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I think the problem that I had with the movie is they made it into a love story. And if you read the book, that's not a love story going on there. It's hate, and you know, in the movie it's, oh, this beautiful choice she has to become a vampire. She didn't get that choice in the book, so it's kind of like, it's minor details, but it changes that story, like I said, into a love story, and it's like, this was not a love story. This, you know, she hated him because of what he did to Lucy and her husband. She hated him, despised him. There's no
he
way.
was a monster.
Yeah, there's no way you're going to get that twisted into, oh, but I love him. No, she didn't. She despised him. She wanted him dead, And then I could be wrong.
Too late.
I think in the movie they said he was actually Vlad. I don't remember that being in the book.
No,
I think it was
not.
referenced he looked like him, but it wasn't him. But in the movie, it's him. So I completely understand why Hollywood went that route. You put someone like that in that role, people identify with it better. You don't have a lot of he was a cruel, harsh man. You know that because who he is, So I understand they took that route with him, but like I said, it is different. There's little few difference that does make the book different, but I enjoyed the movie. Like I said, Halloween, I enjoyed the movie then. It was one of those, maybe I should have went back, but there's a lot more sex going on in Coppola's story than what was happening in Brahms. Just saying.
Yeah, well, again, Victorian England.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to. I mean, my thing.
Go ahead.
My thing
Do
with the Coppola, with the '92 movie version of the novel from 1897. I didn't. Okay, I can see where it's easy to see it as a love story. I think the deal is that it's more of a seduction story.
Yeah.
And that's a little more closely fitting with the novel.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it's modernized in the 1992 version a lot more, because if you do the Victorian thing, you're going to lose a lot of your audience, and there is no way they spent that much money on that movie to pitch it to the Dickensian people out there who want to go see a movie. That would be crazy. So yeah, they're going to modernize it quite a bit. But yeah, the whole deal with Dracula as a character was about seduction, and that it's true in the novel. Obviously, it's told a lot differently, but because they didn't, that was a little taboo back then.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were hints and guesses, and honestly, a lot of the whole Vlad the Impaler thing kind of got it. Honestly, it got discovered when Stoker's lost notes were found back in, I think it was in the 60s. And so the quote unquote major scholarship that was happening on that stuff at the time honestly kind of overblew the Vlad Tepes connection. I mean, it was there. Obviously, Stoker had heard of that legend.
Right.
And there was some, I mean, he got the name from it, basically. He twisted it a little bit. But yeah, there was a lot more to it than that. And I mean, it was a much more a work of imagination than some people wanted to give it credit for. But yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yep. I have the book that sparked a lot of that. I used to keep when I was back in my professional life, when I was managing a team. I used to keep 2 books on my shelf, and I used to make sure I pointed them out to everybody. Um, there was that one, and there was if you've heard of Despair.com, the guy who created that wrote a book, which is, I mean, it's written basically like a PhD dissertation. It's called The Art of Demotivation. So I used to keep The Art of Demotivation and basically a biography of Vlad the Impaler on my bookshelf when I was a manager.
That's pretty cool.
My own little twisted sense of humor.
Did you ever point to the wrong book and tell somebody to read this?
Oh, they were right next to each other, so I would just point from across the room, and they couldn't tell which book it was, and so they had to guess.
Very wise.
Fortunately, I also worked with several people who thought it was funny, so I used to like to hire weird people.
I won't say that.
Keep it clean. As I tell my 15-year-old all the time, keep it clean. Mom's in the house.
Well, can we send her out for a few minutes, Dad?
He has not asked me that yet. I expect him to at some point.
Okay. Les?
I first read this novel when I was in high school.
I was going to say, if you say when it came out, I swear.
I had Stoker sign it.
This was one of 2 novels that I wanted to make sure I read while I was in high school. The other was Hunchback of Notre Dame. 2 fascinating stories. One is truly a love story. The other is not. Not just by reading the book. But you look at Dracula, and I can see where it could or would be a love story. The variances were pretty, well, you could say abrupt, because there were scenes in the Coppola movie that you would, if you read the book, you go, where the hell did they get that? And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. If you're going to create something, go all out.
Yeah.
But try to stay within parameters. That was the difference between that version and the Lugosi version. Lugosi had a love story going also, but it was subtle as compared to the overt version that Coppola did. And that, to me, was a shame. I enjoyed the Coppola version. But just the fact that let's do it just for the hell of it didn't sit well. The idea of bringing in new characters for Coppola's movie was absurd. You get people playing cowboys or just goofy renditions of the Bram Stoker characters. Floored me. Just tell me the good story and move on. Unfortunately, Coppola had to stretch it as much as he could and that's because of the audiences. He was not, like you folks said, he was not playing to the Downton Abbey group in his movie. So you had to play to who you had, who you knew. This is a book that I recommend. I think it's a fabulous book. And I hope we do have some people that decide to check it out or pick it up or whatever you want to do to take it in, because it's a good read, strong read. And I can get past all the wordiness that Liz was saying because I've read Michener. And if you want to sit through pain, read Michener. And I hope that I'll be receiving a yeah, but...
Oh, yeah. No question.
But try this one out.
It's been a long time since I've read it, and I kind of remember having some struggles with it, but I did like the story. Yeah, it's well worth the effort.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what came for this book regarding the concept of vampires themselves. Mike, can you help me with that? Is this really the first book that really kind of touched on? And I know a lot of stuff. I know it influenced our thinking of vampires of always in a tuxedo and then having the accent and all that kind of thing. But I'm just talking about the whole concept of vampires itself. Was this what was before this book? Can you do you happen to know off the top of your head?
I can give vague answers. I didn't study for this or anything. It's been a while, but the tricky part, the pain in the ass answer is that every major culture, and honestly a good many of the minor cultures in the world, have some variation of a vampire myth.
Okay.
There are vampire. With Dracula, what you get is an iconic version of the Eastern European vampire. There are multiple variations on it in Europe alone. There are weird and wonderful ones multiple ones from Africa, multiple ones from Asia. There are even a couple of Native American myths that are not that are kind of recognizable as vampires. So they've gone back for thousands of years. The deal with Dracula is not that it was the first; it's just that it was an extremely popular one.
Right.
And
well done at its time.
There was enough dabbling in fact and or history that it managed to click with people's psyches. And also, let's be realistic. It started being adapted for the stage basically while it was being written.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Stoker himself did the first stage play adaptation of it, and he basically released it at the same time that the novel came out. There's kind of a legend behind that, because the story that likes to be told is that he wrote it because Stoker, by profession, was a theater manager. Back in the times when theaters were putting on plays. and so he actually, the legend says that he wrote this for his favorite actor that he worked with.
Mhm.
What was his name? Was Irving, something Irving. I'm blanking on what the guy's first name was, but yeah, he was a very popular actor in London at the time. And Stoker, the idea is that Stoker allegedly wrote the role of Dracula for this guy, and the guy basically hated the role when he read it. But anyway, that sort of that sort of legendary story comes out of that has nothing to do with what's in the book itself. But
Right.
that's how iconic the whole story became. Is you get stories about stories about stories around this thing. So, um, yeah, I mean, one famous example that we've actually, I think, talked about before because we've talked about Frankenstein. Um, Frankenstein was born. The idea of the novel of Frankenstein was born in Mary Shelley's head, um, according to legend, anyway, based on a stormy night when she and uh, her future husband Shelley and their poet buddy Lord Byron and the guy they were traveling with um, sat around making up scary stories one night. Um, Frankenstein was not the only published work that came from that. Um, I want to say part of what Byron came up with for that ended up in one of his major works, but also the other guy, John Polidori, who was a who was basically Byron's servant slash doctor, um, ended up writing a book called The Vampire that came out I think a little bit after Frankenstein did.
Vampire was 1819.
Yeah, because I believe Frankenstein initially came out in 18,
I think
if
so.
I remember right. Yeah. Um, and so you get and you so there are vampire stories that are already happening at that point. Um, there are several more. I've read one that was written in the 1830s at one point. Um, I forget when Le Fanu wrote. I think it was later. It was more along the lines of in Stoker's era, but I'm not sure if it was before or after. I mean, Sheridan Le Fanu was an Irish writer, I believe. Um, the story of his that people would be familiar with is Carmilla.
No.
Yeah.
Um, that's been adapted to film several times too.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so yeah, vampire stories all over the place. I mean, some of the variations get weird too, but I mean, there's one that springs to mind. I can't remember what the specific name of it is, but essentially the creature walks around as a normal person during the day, and at night the head separates from the body and sprouts wings from the side of the head, and it flies around attacking people.
Woohoo!
Ooh,
Yeah, that's
sounds
just
like
one.
Texas mosquitoes.
Kinda, yeah.
Wow.
It kind of does.
Didn't Stoker write a short story prior to Dracula that kind of dealt with this? Kind of let him say, this monster exists, and then he turned around and did a uh, full novel on it.
Uh, yeah, he had published some stories before, and actually managed, I think, published 3 or 4 more novels after Dracula.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, there several of the stories, the shorter stories, are vampire tangential, if nothing else. Some of those they've had movies made out of them too. One, I don't know how well known it is, but I'm pretty sure at least some of us are familiar with it. Was a movie that came out in the late 80s, called The Lair of the White Worm,
Uh-huh.
which features two interesting young actors.
Don't say Jensen Ackles.
No.
Okay.
Hugh Grant was in it, and I'm blanking on the name. The 12th Doctor.
Peter Capaldi.
Peter Capaldi
Yeah.
is also in it. It's the movie is hilarious and fun because it's just so camp and over the top. But it's based on a Stoker story, and it's the creature, I'll call it for lack of a better term, is not strictly a vampire, but there are some similarities to it.
I have to watch that one.
I don't know
Looks
if
like
I've
it's
ever
on
watched
Tubi
that. Ooh, or not Tubi.
and the Roku channel.
There you go.
Directed by-
Not the Roku. Oh,
Directed by Ken Russell.
yes.
The other notable star of it is Amanda Donohoe.
Yeah, I just saw that myself.
She is not always dressed in this movie. I'm just going to say.
That's Victorian.
This one was not based in Victorian times. I mean, the original story was probably written then or in that time, but yeah, no, they're driving around in cars in this movie. It's modernized, but it's entertaining.
Someone naked in a Ken Russell film. Who would have imagined that would happen?
Shocking, right?
What else would y'all like to cover? I know. There's been some mention about how the female characters were handled in the book, where like Lucy was more adventurous, how we should say, I guess, where Mina was not.
Yeah.
Or Lucy had 3 suitors, and she's like, why can't I have all 3? Why do I have to make a choice?
God, it's been long enough since I read the book that I don't remember that really being her attitude in the book. I think it might have been implied. And it was definitely present in the quote unquote definitive movie.
Oh yeah,
the
the movie
Lugosi
definitely.
version. She was
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she was all up in that.
Yeah. Or they were all up in that. Boom.
Woo. But yeah, it's in a way it's kind of an interesting document to look at, an interesting way to look at how different society was back then, especially stuck-up British society.
Right.
Yeah.
Because even it would have been winding down by, what's almost the turn of the century.
Right.
I mean, yes, Queen Victoria was still on the throne at the time, but she was getting older and not influencing culture as much as she had in the past. So things were loosening up. And of course, with it being a story of seduction, it's supposed to be loosening that a little bit. So,
Okay. Well, I think everybody here recommends giving this book a chance. if nothing else, just like you said, kind of from a historical perspective of kind of shining a light how things were back then at that time, to a degree.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, take your time, sit down and read. This is good stuff.
And honestly, even if for whatever reason you just can't stand it, keep in mind that there have been literally hundreds of variations on the story made into movies.
Yeah.
This thing had been made into, there had been at least a dozen different versions by the time the first film of it was made. And that was only, honestly, 25 years later. So there are bajillion, there's just versions. Watch a few of those and find one you like. Challenge yourself to go back and watch some of the earliest ones. I mean, the first major release one was 1922. I mean, try watching a silent movie for a change. See how you like it.
Yeah.
It's creepy as hell, to be honest, that version. And it's pretty for a movie that was supposedly destroyed because of lawsuits by the estate, because he was dead by then. It was supposed to be destroyed. It's pretty readily available now. So you can find it. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a version or 2 or 17 on YouTube. And there are quote unquote more official versions out there. It's gotten DVD and Blu-ray releases. But yeah, basically just if you can't stand reading the book, just try a different version than you've seen before in movie form. It's cool.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interesting variations on the story out there.
Mm-hmm. All right. On that note, I think we'll take a quick break and be back with Geek News for You. And we're back, and it's time for Geek News for You. This is where we pick a couple of news items and bring it to the table for discussion. This week, it is Les and myself. And Les, why don't you go first?
Thank you, sir. Being an idiot, my story this week is concerning 4 movies that were released in this month in 1967. Now, there were plenty of movies from June, but the ones I looked at were considered major. And if you folks have a disagreement, please let me know, both here in our discussion or online. I was looking at Up the Down Staircase. This was a drama from '67 with Sandy Dennis. This was based on a very popular book at that time. I remember reading this book because it was more or less a novel that the school wanted you to read at that time. The movie was pretty awesome too. And there was a second movie based on teaching in schools at that time, and that was To Serve with Love, which was also a major award winner. To Serve with Love was probably known more than Up the Down Staircase, although it too was based on a book. Something that that I actually did read too. I enjoyed that one. It was a drama, but it was pretty freaking fine also. The third movie I noticed was Hell's Angels on Wheels. And this was just one of those films that were going to go against the establishment. Let's go. It was pretty brutal, pretty. It was one of those that was not kind in any way, shape, or form, but it did make a major impact. And the fourth one is one of my favorites, and it's El Dorado with John Wayne, James Caan,
Robert Mitchum.
And that one was fun because Mitchum played a sheriff that was always drunk, but he had to get out of the stupor to fight the villains. And the villains were pretty stout to begin with, and the acting there was also fine. I think that was James Gregory in that one.
I seem to remember Ed Asner as the main bad guy, but I could be wrong. I may be getting mixed up.
Funny story. Just in random flipping around on TV recently, I've caught the last 5 minutes of that movie like 3 times in the last few weeks.
Nice.
Timing is everything, Michael.
And it is not mine, that is for sure. I do not have the timing.
I love El Dorado. I know there's been some criticism of it being like basically a ripoff of Rio Bravo. I can see that. I can see why people would think that way. But I like the film. There's one scene that is kind of cringeworthy now. But it's a good movie. The music's by Nelson Riddle, and I know I made a post on Facebook several years ago, saying, talking about me watching this and hearing the music and thinking at some point John Wayne and Rob and I just told you his name, now I forgot it.
Robert Mitchum.
Robert Mitchum are walking down the street and they're gonna find Adam West beating the shit out of Cesar Romero. Because it's definitely the Batman vibe of music, and I'm not saying that as to be mean or evil. I mean it's that flavor, and it sounds great. Which, considering it's a Western, don't think that kind of music.
I was gonna say, if it works, who cares, right?
Yeah, it sounds great. So yeah, I like the film. That's a really good one.
So that's kind of me this week.
Yeah, other than that one cringe moment, it's okay. And I think you know where I'm talking about, Les, don't you?
Yeah, I believe so. I know what you're talking about.
Right toward the end, it involves James Caan.
And the horse?
Not the horse, but trying to take out the guard at the back of the saloon.
Oh yeah. Let's make sure that we hit all the buttons for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and it's funny because I've seen that movie several times. There was one time I saw it on AMC. Mm-hmm. They cut that bit out. They on purposely edit that part out.
That's a shame.
You see him getting ready to approach the guard, and then next thing you know, he's punching the guy, and that's it. You just miss that, and it's like what, 15 seconds, 20 seconds,
if that long.
if that long. But it could be it could be viewed very offensive. So yeah. So, and if y'all want to know what it's talking about, y'all gotta watch the movie. There you go.
Suckers.
Okay. I am next, and speaking of movies, from the department of Let's Try This Again, since we hadn't done it before, is the creators of Cobra Kai and Legendary Entertainment are joining forces to supposedly develop a Duke Nukem movie.
What?
If you're not familiar with Duke Nukem, it was a series of video games beginning back in the early 90s. I've played a couple of them. It's basically a first-person shooter.
Yeah, it was one of Doom's big competitors.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
pretty sure one of them ripped off the other somehow, but I don't really know the history behind it. So
I don't know.
Not sure which one came first.
Yeah,
I don't know which came first either.
If I had to guess, it would be Doom, because they had already put out Wolfenstein before Doom, so they had already kind of set the mold on how these first-person shooters.
Yeah.
See, I'd want to say it was Doom too. I remember Doom or playing Doom, but I don't remember a lot of Duke Nukem.
Yeah,
I remember it, but not playing it.
because I played a ton of Castle Wolfenstein back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And Doom, not as much with Duke Nukem. But anyway, aliens have invaded the Earth, and you play Duke Nukem, and he is literally a parody of the 80s action hero. All muscles, sunglasses, the cheesy one-liners, everything.
All of the 80s packed into one video game.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
Which makes it just amazing to me that 40 years on, we're still allegedly trying to make a movie about this.
There's been several attempts. According to the article, the last attempt was basically about 4 years ago. And guess who was on board at the time?
I wouldn't dare to venture a guess.
John Cena.
That actually might work, but see, what cracks me up is that the Doom movie was so atrociously bad. Why are we trying to replicate that? How are we going to improve this to make it better than that?
Well, I mean, they still try to do video games turn into movies. They still they still try to do it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're still trying to make a Dungeons and Dragons movie too, and they still haven't realized that the deal with Dungeons and Dragons is there's no story.
Yeah.
So the last Mortal Kombat movie was pretty good, though.
Don't throw good movies into this to confuse us. Come on now.
So,
but the Mario one sucked.
Obviously, no director or writer has been attached since this is just now coming down. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens. You know, like I said, there's been several attempts to try to do this, and nothing's come about. So,
yeah,
no studio's willing to throw enough money at it to make it work, to make it happen. So,
well,
I think sometimes they throw it out. They're like, let's see what the stir is on this. You know,
oh, sure, totally.
If it's enough, we'll do it. But if not, it would be broke down in negotiations.
Is there any interest? I don't know. Put out a press release and let's find out.
Yeah.
Basically.
I bet that happens a lot more than we realize.
Yep.
Run it up the flagpole.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any special shout-outs this week?
No, don't think so.
No.
Not here.
All right, we'll go on to our regular, shout-outs. first off, to Pop Goes the Culture Podcast Network for allowing us to be part of a great group of fellow shows. Definitely check them out. There will be a link in our show notes. We also want you to check out the fine men and women who make up Podern Family, who've been so gracious as to spread the word of the fellowship by retweeting our links. Definitely check them out on Twitter. The way to do that is just do a search, #Podern Family, all one word. Just scroll through the list, and whatever catches your eye, please click on that link and download the episode. And hope you have a great time listening to them. I also want to thank Mary the Martyr for supplying music to our podcast. There will be a link in the show notes where you can check out their music. Thank you guys as always. And finally, you, dear listener, thank you for downloading and listening to today's episode. We value your feedback. Any questions, comments, suggestions, complaints, observations, what have you, please send them our way. Our email address is email@thefellowshipofthegeeks.net. Or you can go to the website and go to the About Us page, and there's a contact form that you can fill out from there. You can join, like I said, we can join our Discord. We do have a channel specifically designed for feedback, so you can post your comments there. On social media, we are on Facebook, The Fellowship of the Geeks. Instagram, we're at Fellowship Geeks, and obviously we are on Twitter at Fellowship Geeks as well. If you like to follow our personal Twitter accounts, Mike can be found at Mikey Geek. Liz can be found at LN_Geek. Les may or may not be found at Fake Les Webster. And I can be found at TomTC Geek. And from wherever you download our episodes, if you would please take a couple additional moments to rate and review our show, it would be greatly appreciated. Anything else before we say goodbye?
Just thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate you listening.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We do appreciate the support as always. Until next time, geek on, my friends.
We thank you for listening to the show. Comments, suggestions, and questions can be sent to email@thefellowshipofthegeeks.net. You can follow us on Facebook at The Fellowship of the Geeks and on Twitter at Fellowship Geeks. Until next time,